Solve this equation and I'll marry you. Professor Catherine Wells stood at the whiteboard in her advanced mathematics classroom at Riverside University, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her cream-colored dress pressed and elegant. At 52, she had built her reputation on brilliance and an intimidating presence that kept most students at a respectful distance. The equation she had just written was her masterpiece, a complex problem that had stumped graduate students for months. Anyone who can solve this, she announced with a confident smile, tapping the board with her marker, I'll marry them right here and now. The classroom erupted in nervous laughter. Everyone knew Professor Wells wasn't married, had never been married, and seemed to take pride in her solitary life of academic achievement. The joke was safe because the equation appeared impossible. Marcus Thompson had been cleaning the hallways of Riverside University for nearly 30 years. At 58, he moved through the building with quiet dignity, his gray custodian's uniform always neat, his demeanor always respectful. Most people looked right through him, seeing only the men who emptied their trash bins and mopped their floors. They didn't see the young man who once dreamed of becoming a mathematician, whose family circumstances had forced him to leave college in his second year to care for his ailing mother. That evening, as Marcus pushed his cleaning cart past Professor Wells' classroom, he noticed she had left the whiteboard uncleaned. The equation still stood there, proud and challenging, illuminated by the hallway light streaming through the doorway. Marcus had made it a habit over the years to look at the mathematical problems left on boards throughout the building. It kept his mind sharp, kept alive the part of him that had once loved numbers more than anything. He stopped his cart and stepped into the empty classroom. His eyes traced the equation, and something stirred in his memory. He had seen something similar years ago, back when he was studying advanced calculus before life had interrupted his education. His fingers itched to try. Looking around the empty room, Marcus picked up a marker. What harm could it do? He would erase it before anyone saw. His hand moved across the board, working through the problem step by methodical step. The solution began to unfold before him like a flower opening to the sun. 30 minutes later, he stepped back and stared at what he had written. Unless he was mistaken, he had solved it. Marcus carefully photographed the board with his old phone, then erased everything except the original equation, making sure the classroom looked exactly as he had found it. He pushed his cart onward, but his heart was beating faster than it had in years. The next morning, Professor Wells arrived early, as was her custom. She stopped dead in her doorway, her coffee cup frozen halfway to her lips. The equation was still there, but beneath it, in different handwriting, was a complete solution. Not just any solution, but an elegant, beautiful piece of mathematical reasoning that took her breath away. She spent the next hour checking the work, going through each step with growing astonishment. It was correct. Absolutely, undeniably correct. But who had solved it? The handwriting wasn't familiar. None of her students wrote with such old-fashioned precision. Professor Wells did something she had never done before. She went to the security office and asked to see the previous night's footage of her classroom hallway. The security guard, surprised by her interest, pulled up the recording. Together they watched as Marcus Thompson entered her classroom, studied the board, and then began to write. That's just Marcus, the guard said. Been here forever. Good man. Never causes any trouble. Catherine Wells felt something crack open inside her chest. She had seen Marcus hundreds of times over the years, had probably walked past him 1,000 times without really seeing him. She had never known his name until this moment. She found him that afternoon in the building's lower level, cleaning the faculty break room. He looked up as she entered, and she saw something flash in his eyes, something that might have been recognition or perhaps resignation. Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice softer than she had ever used in the classroom. I believe we need to talk about a certain equation. Marcus straightened slowly, setting down his cleaning cloth. I apologize, Professor Wells. I shouldn't have touched your board. I meant to erase it all, I only left the original problem. You solved it, she said. In 30 minutes, you solved something my graduate students couldn't crack in 3 months. He met her eyes then, and she saw in them a depth of intelligence and quiet dignity that made her ashamed she had never noticed before. I used to study mathematics, he said simply. A long time ago. They talked then, standing in that break room while the coffee machine gurgled and the afternoon sun slanted through the windows. Marcus told her about his mother's illness, about leaving school to care for her, about her passing 5 years later when he was too old and too poor to return to his studies. He told her about finding joy in the problems left on whiteboards, about keeping his mind alive in the quiet hours of the night. Catherine told him about her own journey, about building walls around herself after a broken engagement in her 30s, about choosing equations over people because numbers never disappointed you, never left you, never died. I made a promise, she said, and for the first time in decades, she felt uncertain. I said I would marry whoever solved that equation. Marcus smiled, a warm expression that transformed his face. I think we both know you didn't mean it, Professor. No, she agreed. I didn't. But perhaps I should have meant something else. Perhaps I should have said I would give whoever solved it a chance. A real chance. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened at Riverside University. Professor Catherine Wells and Marcus Thompson began to spend time together. At first, it was just conversations about mathematics, meeting in her office after his shift ended. She would present problems, and he would work through them with a joy that reminded her why she had fallen in love with mathematics in the first place. But gradually, their conversations expanded beyond numbers. They talked about music, about the books they had read, about the small moments of beauty they had noticed in their very different lives. Catherine discovered that Marcus volunteered at a community center, teaching basic math to adults who had never finished school. Marcus learned that Catherine had a sister she hadn't spoken to in 5 years over some long-forgotten argument. Call her, he said one evening as they sat in her office, the campus quiet around them. Life is too short, and pride is too expensive. Catherine did call her sister. They both cried. They made plans to visit. Marcus, encouraged by Catherine's belief in him, began taking online courses. At 58, he started reclaiming the education he had set aside so long ago. Catherine helped him with applications, with financial aid forms, with the complex mathematics that had evolved in the decades since he had last studied. The university community began to notice the changes. Students saw their intimidating professor smile more, saw her stop to talk with the custodial staff, saw her treating everyone with a warmth that had been absent before. Faculty members noticed Marcus carrying mathematics textbooks, saw the way his eyes lit up when he talked about returning to school. There were whispers, of course. Some people couldn't understand why a distinguished professor would spend time with a janitor. But others saw something beautiful happening, a reminder that human value isn't measured by job titles or salary grades. On a spring evening, nearly a year after Marcus had solved that equation, Catherine organized something special. She invited Marcus to give a guest lecture in her classroom, to talk about the beauty of mathematics and the importance of never giving up on your dreams, no matter how much time has passed. Marcus stood at that same whiteboard where he had first written his solution, facing a room full of students who had only ever seen him pushing a cleaning cart. He talked about his journey with honest emotion, about loving something so much that it stays alive inside you even when life takes you in different directions. He talked about the professor who had seen him, really seen him, when he had felt invisible for so long. There wasn't a dry eye in the classroom. Even Catherine, standing at the back, found tears streaming down her face. After the students left, Marcus and Catherine stood alone in the classroom. The evening sun painted the walls gold, and the air felt full of possibility. I never did make good on that promise, Catherine said. About marrying whoever solved the equation. Marcus smiled. I think you did something better. You reminded me that I was still a mathematician, even when I was holding a mop instead of a marker. You reminded me that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. You did the same for me, she said softly. You reminded me that the most elegant equation in the world means nothing if you have no one to share it with. You taught me to see people again, to value connection over achievement. They stood together in the golden light, two people in their 50s who had found in each other not just romance, but recognition, not just companionship but completion. Marcus did return to school full-time. 2 years later, at 60, he earned his bachelor's degree in mathematics. Catherine was there at his graduation, cheering louder than anyone. He went on to earn a master's degree, and eventually, the university hired him as an instructor. He specialized in teaching non-traditional students, those who had taken long detours in life before finding their way back to education. Catherine and Marcus did eventually marry, in a small ceremony attended by students, faculty, and all the custodial staff who had worked alongside Marcus for so many years. It wasn't because of an equation, though that equation still held a special place in their hearts. It was because they had found in each other a reminder that life's most important solutions can't be written on a whiteboard. They had found that sometimes the person who can solve your most difficult problem is the one you never thought to ask, the one you never thought to see. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is remain open to being surprised, to being changed, to being seen by someone who looks past all your walls and defenses and sees the person you actually are. In their quiet moments together, Marcus and Catherine often reflected on how a single equation had changed both their lives. But it wasn't really the equation, they knew. It was the willingness to see beyond surfaces, beyond assumptions, beyond the narrow definitions of worth that society tries to impose. It was the courage to recognize brilliance wherever it appears, and the grace to let yourself be changed by love, even when it comes from the most unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story from the Black Voices, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories, and leave a comment below telling us what this story meant to you.